Well, guys, we are in part 2 of the series, as you just saw, called Money See, Money Do. And throughout this series, the thing that we're doing is we're looking at money, but we're not looking at it from my perspective, from Buck's perspective, or from Northpoint's perspective. No, we're going right to the source. We're looking at it the way Jesus sees money. And the reason why we're going right to Jesus is because he talked about money all the time. In fact, if you were to go back to the first century, one of the things that you would realize on the other side of Jesus is pretty much every other sermon on the other side of Jesus was about money. You'd be like, okay, he talked about money today. And then the next time he talked about money again, talked about money again. And as we said last week, I mean, the number one practical thing Jesus talked about was money. In fact, he talked about it more than heaven. In fact, out of the 38 parables where he would teach us about life and about God, 16 of the 38 parables had to do with money. He talked about it all the time. And one of the questions is why? And one of the reasons he talked about it all the time is because he just wanted us to see it clearly. He wanted to give us the gift of clarity. Because if we could see money the way God sees money, we will be far more inclined to do with what God says to do with money. And that's a big deal. Because what Jesus came into the world to do is to invite you and I into life, and life to the full. And he says, you have to trust me. And so, guys, because I want you tangibly to experience life and life to the full. That's just not some religious thing. That's just not some like preacher talk, to say that. I really want you to experience that. We have to talk about the way Jesus saw money. So, if you weren't here last week, I want to encourage you to go back, listen to what we said so far in part 1. And today, as we continue this discussion, looking at what Jesus had to say about money, I want to start by getting us thinking a little bit. And I want you to think about this thought, because I think it applies to all of us. So think about this. Here we go. So your self-control determines who or what gets control in your life. My self-control, your self-control, our self-control determines who or what gets control in our lives. Now, there's so many examples of this, but this week as I was thinking about this statement, I thought about my boys, right? All 5 of my sons. And something I've seen them struggle in terms of gets control of them, or from my perspective, it kind of owns them, has to do with technology. So, I was thinking about my boys and I thought about this, TikTok. And maybe you can relate if you've got kids. Your kids are on TikTok all the time, perhaps. At least mine are. And so I'll sit there and I'll watch them scroll on TikTok. And there's 1 hour goes, 2 hour goes, 3 hours. And then I come over and I'm like, what are you looking at? And they're like, nothing. I'm like, 3 hours of time? Nothing. I'm like, do you see how it's controlling you a little bit? Do you see how it's sucking you in a little bit? And they're like, oh, Dad, you just don't know what you're talking about, right? And I see this with social media. But then I also see it with their phones. I mean, just add to Snapchat, Be Real, YouTube, you got TikTok, the whole thing. And they're on their phones for hours and hours and hours. And then it's, games, and there's Minecraft and Fortnite and Valorant and all the other things. And I look at them and I'm like, boys, go outside. Play with your friends. Skin your knee. I would like to come out and help you with that. And they're like, what? Dad, all my friends are right here. I'm like, where? Like right here in my ears. They're all these virtual, and they're like, we're having a great time, having good. This is awesome, Dad. And I look at them, and I'm like, this stuff is so controlling you. And I look at them, and I'm like, can you see, boys, what it's doing? Can you see how it's sucking your brains out of your head? Do you see this? And they look at me, and they're like, Dad, you just don't get it, man, You didn't have this stuff back in the eons when you were a little boy, And I look at them, and I go, there it is. There it is. I mean, their ability to see things clearly, their ability to connect the dots, to have self-control, it determines who or what gets control in their lives. And then I think, to be fair, that's me picking on my boys. But if Jill was up here, Jill would say, oh, let me tell you about Buckaroo, Here's some things he struggles with in terms of control. In fact, the number one thing I think she would say, hey, what controls Buck is his iPad right here. And she would go, oh man, I'm telling you, he loves his iPad. And I would look at her and I'd be like legit, it's wonderful. I mean, my iPad, I read on my iPad, I journal on my iPad, I do our finances on our iPad, I do research on our iPad, I plan what I'm going to talk about on Sundays on our I read marriage books on my iPad. I mean, for you and I, sweetie, this is for you. It's not from me. It's wonderful. It's my precious, And she looks at me and she's like, oh my gosh, if you could see how your iPad is just controlling you, and then, you take it to bed, and she calls it my girlfriend. You take your girlfriend to bed, and it's like, would you just get off? You could probably sleep so much better if you're not on that thing, And so and I'm like pushing, and again, here it shows up. My ability to see clearly, my ability to control or not control, determines who or what gets control over me. And guys, I think we've all experienced this. That's true with my boys and true with me, but I think all of us in life. I mean, perhaps you grew up in a home where, your mom, your dad worked all the time. And you would talk to them a little bit about it, and especially today when you have a little bit more cognitive ability to see clearly what's going on. You were like, man, Mom, you're like addicted to this stuff. Dad, you're over-identifying with this. This is so valuable to you. I wish I was more of a, but like, do you not see how much you work? And then Mom and Dad are like, oh, that's not true. It's not controlling me. This is for you. I want to give you a better life than I ever had. And you're like, oh, not so sure that's exactly what that's about. I think it's about control. We've all seen this, where work begins to own someone. Or maybe not work. Maybe it has to do with anger. Maybe it's like you grew up in a home where your father was angry all the time and you're walking on eggshells. Man, I gotta be perfect because I'm not sure if he's gonna explode, or I'm not sure if that person's gonna explode. And it's like, man, do you see how anger is controlling you? Or maybe it has to do with substance, maybe alcohol. It's like alcohol. No, sweetie. Alcohol's fine. I'm having fun. I'm just taking the edge off. I'm stressed and I'm busy. Alcohol's not controlling me. I mean, alcohol's so unique. It has a unique voice. But yet we push back on that, and it's not controlling me. I'm just fine. I'm good. Or maybe you've seen your son or your daughter or a friend of yours dating someone, and it's like that person is controlling them. It's like they're controlling the direction of their life, the quality of your life. And you're like, do you not see how much they're influencing? Do you not see what's happening? And the whole time you're going, do you see? Do you see? Do you see? And isn't it true that when you try to point these things out or try to reflect how things are controlling or owning someone, it's like, no, not me. Not me. I'm fine. I'm good. You're just making such a big deal out of nothing. And there you have it, because we've all experienced it. We've all seen it, to where your self-control determines who or what gets control in your life. Guys, we all know this. Could this also be true when it comes to money? Could money be potentially controlling us, using us, determining what we value, determining how we see the world, determining what we're chasing more than we care to admit? If I was to say, like, do you see it? Do you see it? Can you see how money's controlling us? Or, somebody was to reflect that to you, I mean, what's going to be our response? And even if you have a lot of it, maybe you have tons of money and you actually teach courses, maybe, teach people how to be free or financially, invest their money and all, and you're like, man, I got tons of money. But that doesn't really matter. You can have tons of money and it can be completely owning and controlling you. What about you? Is money owning you? Is money controlling you? I think if you're honest, I think for some of you, you go, well, Buck, it has nothing to do with control or ownership. For me, if I only had a little bit more money, it's about more. I just need more, right? And here's the deal. I'll try to be very clear and honest with this stuff. That is true. There is a percentage. There are a group of people maybe here today or watching or listening online that you do need more. And here's what I would encourage you to do. Go online and do the research. Because there is lots of research on how much you need to meet the demands of life, to sustain in life, the necessities of life. And what you're going to discover is that number is far lower than what perhaps you think you actually need. Which means the majority of us, it's not the issue of more. It has nothing to do with making more money. In fact, I love what Jim Carrey, he's the actor and comedian, the whole guy. Jim Carrey, I love this quote. I've referenced this a bunch, but he says this: I think everybody should get rich and famous and do everything they ever dreamed of so that they can see it's not the answer. Here's a guy with millions and millions and millions and millions and millions, keep going, millions, lots of them. And he says, listen, I got to the pinnacle of fame, of everything I've dreamed of fortune, everything you're working so hard for. And let me tell you what's up there. It's not the answer. Now, let's just be honest. All of us read this and we go, well, I'd like to try. I'd like to figure that out. Like, I'd like to experiment. I don't think it'll control me. I think I'm pretty good. Let me try, right? I get it. But here's the deal. So many people have gotten to the pinnacle. They get up there and they go, listen, I know you're chasing it, and I know, but listen, it's not the answer. So if the answer for the majority of us is not more money, what is the answer? What is the way forward? What is this tension? Because there's so much palatable tension when it comes to money. Well, here's why Jesus was so brilliant. He leans into this conversation and he says, I'll tell you what is at the heart of the matter. And he does this in Matthew chapter 6, where he talks about money. He gives us such clarity on money. And in Matthew 6, Jesus is talking to a large crowd. I mean, one of the distinctives, you hear me talk about it all the time when it comes to Jesus. I mean, large crowd, there's the religious people and the people who are nothing like Jesus. And then people who are nothing like Jesus, they liked him. They're all part of the crowd. So it's a huge mixed crowd. God followers and people are like, I'm not so sure about the God thing. And so they're all around Jesus. He's teaching about all these things of life. And he goes, okay, let me tell you how God sees money. Guys, one of the gifts I want to give you is clarity. It's one of the greatest gifts you could give anybody, clarity. So let me give you clarity on how God sees money, because if he designs you, if he loves you, he's actually inviting you into something far better than perhaps you know. So here's the clarity, and here's what's really going on with money. He says this: no one can serve two masters. To which you want to go, are we talking about money? He's like, just hang with me. No one can serve two masters, he continues. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you will be devoted to one and despise the other. Jesus, I'm confused a little bit. I want to scratch my head and just go, what are you getting at? And I love what Jesus is doing here. This was originally written in the Greek, what he's saying here. In the Greek, when you look at the word master, it's the word kurios, and it means one who is in charge by virtue of possession or ownership. So I own you. There is something I am in charge of. I am determining. I am dictating. I am causing you to do these things. It is an ownership and a possession issue. So you go, Jesus, what does this have to do with money? He says, everything. Because he goes, no one can serve two masters. You cannot serve both God and money. They are mutually exclusive. One will always be subservient to the other. There's no way. Don't play the religious game. I can balance this. I'm a good Christian. I can balance. No, you can't. This is, again, argue with Jesus. Go to Matthew 6. And Jesus is saying, no, you got to pick. Because one will love or despise, be devoted or, despise. You got to pick, because one is always going to serve the other. One's going to be your master. So who is your master? In other words, when it comes to money, Jesus, again, so brilliant. He says the issue isn't, I need more money. The issue is mastery. The issue is about control. The issue is about ownership. And so if that's the issue for Jesus, and he's trying to give us clarity on money, then there's some natural questions I think we should ask. I mean, if we're hanging out with Jesus and he's like, okay, that's the issue, then we should go, okay, Jesus, if you're trying to give us clarity and you don't want anything from us, because Jesus never asked for money. He always invited us into something which he said, life and life to the full. But this is a big issue. This is a big gap. So if mastery is the issue, then the natural question we should ask, do you have money? Or does money have you? Or maybe to ask it a different way. Do you possess and use money, or does money possess and use you? Who's controlling you? Who is your master? Most of us, and especially the men, but I think women as well, would be like, no one's my master. I'm my own master. I'm good, right? But how do you know? How do you know? Well, I was thinking about it this week, and I thought about a week and a half ago, my son and I, Sam and I, my oldest son, we connected, and it just he highlighted something in this discussion we're having today that I feel like is relevant. And so Sam, if you don't know my oldest son, Sam's 20 years old, so I have a son who's 2-0. He's in his twos, and I'm like, wow. I feel, it's happening to me. Anyways, so Sam and I are connecting, and Sam, he doesn't live with us. He's out on his own, and so that's a whole new dynamic, and, he's figuring out life and, working and paying bills and all this kind of stuff. So anytime I get to connect, it's really, really exciting for me. So we're connecting at one of the greatest places you could ever connect with your children, Freddy's. And I love Freddy's because if you've ever gone there and you've had the turtle, you know what I'm talking about. Not the turtle like all mixed together. No, I want to see my pecans. I want to see the fudge. I want to see the whipped cream, the ice cream. I want to see it all because then I want to eat it one by one. Mostly the fudge because I like chocolate. But anyways, I've digressed. So Sam and I are meeting, right? And we're talking about life and we're having a good time. And I'm like, you know, how's life going and how's work and how's this? And talking about God and all these kind of things. And then as we're talking about work, he's like, Dad, I'm looking, you know, here's some opportunities. And one day I want to start, you know, my own business, be a, you know, entrepreneurial kind of guy and all this stuff. And I'm like, that's cool. What you know, what do you want to do? And he's talking about it. And I'm like, okay, then what? He's like, I want to make a bunch of money, like tons and tons of money. And I'm like, oh, you do? Okay, so then what? Like, what do you want to do with it? He's like, then I want to buy all kinds of amazing things. I want to get some stuff, like the new 2024, you know, Ford Mustang. Oh, it's rad, Dad. Have you read about it? So cool. I could buy one of those and then upgrade a classic car. And then I could buy, you know, a house and Timbo and I could live. And then we could set up this big old shop. And then I could buy this big old piece of property. Then a few helicopters, then a few jets. All right, son, I like you're ambitious, you know. And I'm listening to all this, and then I'm like, well, you're learning. I mean, you're out on your own, so you know. I mean, lots of taxes, lots of insurance. There's a lot to keep up with the more that you have. And he's like, oh, yeah. I'm like, so what are you going to do then? He's like, I'm going to get a better job and make more money so I could get more stuff. And I thought, man, there it is. That's how you know. That there's this cycle. It's kind of like this wheel that you get on. Where it's like, man, I got to make more to get more to keep up with more. And it's like, you know, the more that I make, the more that I can get. And I want to get more and get more and get more. And if I can get more, man, that is awesome. I want these more experiences. But then I got to keep up with that. And so now my standard of living has gone up. My expectations have gone up. I need a little bit more cool, a little bit more, you know, amazing. So then I got to make more. And I got to chase and round and round and round you go. And before long, it begins to move into these appetites, these unbridled desires. Before long, it's like, man, I desire more. I desire cooler. I desire shinier. I desire, you know, more bougie. I desire, you know, and this is now my normal standard of life. And these unbridled desires, appetites are never fully and finally satisfied. We chase and we chase and we chase and we consume and we consume and we consume. And round and round and round we go with this. Or maybe not unbridled desires. Maybe it has everything to do with unbridled fear. Again, fear is, I can't consume. I need to save. I need to save. I need to save. What about tomorrow? What about next week? What about next month? What about the economy? What about inflation? What about the world? What about all? And all of a sudden, it's about me and and it owns us. And what Jesus understood is behind all of those unbridled desires and all that unbridled fear and around this whole cycle, what is driving this, at the heart of this, is a word we do not like to talk about, but is almost impossible to see in our lives. It's called greed. Greed is the assumption it's all for my consumption. When a paycheck hits my account, it's mine. When a bonus hits my account, it's mine. When I sell something, it's mine. Look at my business savvy. Look at how much I've worked. And we talked about this last week. Remember? If you can't take it with you, logically speaking, it's not yours. And what Jesus was teaching us last week, if you can't take it with you, then it's God, and he has entrusted it to you, and you are simply a steward for a purpose. It doesn't belong to you. But see, we get into the cycle and go, it's all mine. And before long, it gets to the thing Jesus came to get from you, invited you to give him, your heart. And this cycle puts us on this whole kind of like cyclical thing to go like, it's all about my security. It's all about my experiences. I'm wanting to be satisfied. I'm wanting to chase this. I want this more and more and more. And Jesus says, it's getting your heart. And I have come to invite you to give me your heart. And your money and your heart are permanently connected. In fact, in Matthew 6, when he's talking about money, he says that. He says, for where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Don't fool yourself. Your money and your heart are permanently linked. You cannot unlink the two. And Jesus looks at your heart and says, the chief competition for your heart, I want your heart. I want you to surrender to me. I want you to step in and experience life and life to the full. But the big roadblock is who has your heart. And we think, logically speaking, that your heart is between God and the devil. The devil wants you to think that's what the issue is. Jesus came to give us clarity and says, that's not the issue. The issue for your heart is between God and money. God and money, because he says no one can serve two masters. You cannot serve both God and money. And guys, this is for all of us, every single one of us. Think about it this way, that everyone is at risk of making money their ultimate pursuit or their ultimate concern, which makes it their ultimate. Jesus came into the world to say, I am your ultimate. I am inviting you into life and life to the full. I am the way, the truth, and the life. You want to be healed and reconciled? It's right here with me, and I need all your heart. You want to experience all those desires and all those feelings, and man, I want to experience this. I want to be satisfied. I want to be so nourished. I'm right here. I'm called the bread of life, which means I am the only one who can satisfy. You can chase things in this world, and they will satisfy for a moment, but eventually they leave you empty, so you got to get on that cycle. I'm inviting you to completely surrender to me, which means your heart. And what you will find, it's paradoxical, you got to let go to actually get, is life, and life to the full. So what are you going to do with your money? Jesus asked. Now, we hear that and we're like, okay, Jesus, I get that. And, I got to think about that a little bit. But the issue for me, I don't know, maybe a little bit control, but I got bills to pay. I got responsibilities. I got kids. I got food to put on the table. I've got health care, issues. There's a lot of stuff. Do you care about that? Do you know that's going on in my life? And Jesus is like, of course I do. I designed you. I made you. I'm for you. In fact, Jesus says, let's talk about that. So Jesus begins to get really practical in this discussion about money. I love it. Here's what he says. He says, so do not worry. I get what you're worried. So you don't have to worry. He's saying, what shall we eat, or what shall we drink, or what shall we wear? To contextualize that to 2022, it's like all the things, the necessities for life. We're so consumed. We're so worried. Like, what's going to happen? What if I run out? What about this? What about that? That's worry. That's anxiety. Jesus, this is amazing. He says, don't do that. Don't do that, because he understands that worry puts your heart in a posture of this, and then I worry, and your heart goes, like this. It's now mine. The assumption, it's all for my consumption. Worry, which Jesus understands better than anyone, is practical atheism. That's saying there is no God of tomorrow, no God of next week, no God of next month. He doesn't understand anything. There is no God. And practical atheism, when it comes to God and money and your stuff, as soon as you do that, he understands that now, over time, God eventually disappears. And now all you have is money. And now I'll control it. Now I'll fix it. Now it's up to me for tomorrow, next week, and next month. I am in control. And he's like, there it is. Money's owning you. Money's got you. You don't have to worry a second in your life. How can you say that, Jesus? He says, well, follow me. Hang with me. He says, you know who worries. He continues, the pagans. For the pagans run after all these things. That's what pagans in the first century believed in a plurality of God. They didn't believe in a personal God. They believed in all these gods that were very selfish and like demanding of the people. Jesus says, I've come to give my life for you. Come on, my yoke is easy. Come on. He's like, the pagans, they don't know me. They don't know who I am. And they're trying to control everything as a result. You don't have to worry. Why? For the pagans run after these things, and your heavenly Father knows that you need them. Let me just ask, if you're a follower of Jesus, do you ever pause and think about this? Is this like maybe a daily routine or a weekly routine? Or is there some point of contemplation in your life where you just sit there and go like, you know what? I know God knows exactly what I need tomorrow, next week, and next month. Maybe not all my wants and desires, but he knows to survive, to put food on the table, to put a roof over the head of my family. He knows exactly what I need. You see, if God knows what you need, then why in the world do you need to worry? Why are you so worried? Jesus is going, can you not see that perhaps money is owning you? Money is slipping in to be your master? And if you're here today or maybe watching or listening online, you would go, well, Buck, I can see that maybe a little bit. Or maybe for some, you would go, I can see that a lot. Like Jesus' words are resonating with me. Then the question is, what do we do? Well, what I love about Jesus, he gets so practical. He's so for you. And he says, here's your way forward in a very pragmatic way. You want to know how to be free? You want to know how to switch who's the master of your life and step into life and life to the full? He says, okay, but then there's something else to do. Instead of giving into the desires, instead of giving into the fears, instead of like being controlled by money, there's something different. What is it? But seek first, that's to reorganize, to reprioritize, to rethink, to be intentional. Seek first what, Jesus? He says, his kingdom and his righteousness. Well, what does that even mean? Well, God's kingdom is an others first kingdom. I mean, Jesus, when he was with his disciples, the 12 guys, there's Matthew, James, John, the guys. They all go to Jesus. Jesus, we want to be first. We want to have all the amazing things of life. What does that look like? And Jesus says, you really want to be first? Yeah, I want to be great. I want to be great. Okay, serve. Because that's what my Father's kingdom is about. How can I leverage what I have for your benefit? And then he finishes that by saying, for the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. The night Jesus was betrayed, hours before he was hung on a cross for you and for me. He's in a room with his disciples. He takes off his rabbinic robe and he begins to wash their feet. And right before he washes their feet, he says, I am the most powerful one in the universe. In heaven, on this earth, and everywhere. There's no one more powerful than me. And now that they understood this, then he takes off his rabbinic robe and serves them by washing their feet. And then he says, now you go do that. Because that's what my kingdom is about. It's about others first. Now love as I have loved you, and by this, the world will know you're my followers. His kingdom is others first. His kingdom first. And he was so strategic because he knew every day of your life there's a gravitational pull to do what Sam and I were talking about. To say, no, my kingdom first. No, I got to make more. I got to be more savvy. I got to come up with bigger ideas. I got to get more and more and more in my bank account so I can get more. And then once I get more, now I'm kind of stuck in the cycle that I got to keep up with more. And then I got to make more. Then I got to keep going and going. And he says, that is how money owns you. There is a different way to do this. Seek first, above anything else, God's kingdom and his righteousness. And, I love this, all these things will be given to you as well. All these things you're so consumed about, all these things, not all the wants. There's a whole different category. Money Matters is a great small group to get involved in to discern what are wants and needs. He's talking about your needs, the very things you need in life for your family, for you to thrive in life. I know what you need, kiddo, and I'll give those to you. But this is about who are you going to prioritize. It's almost like Jesus is going, guys, I knit you together in your mother's womb. I was here from the very beginning. Jesus is called the Logos. In other words, he is the word from the very beginning that created all things. And because I created you as my creation, your purpose is not to go and seek the creation. It's not like consume and get more creation, and then I'm going to be satisfied. Then I'm going to finally be fulfilled. No, Jesus' point is, man, I created you. And you were created to seek first your creator. That's where purpose and meaning, that's where lasting joy, that's where, reconciliation, that's where life and life to the full is found. So, guys, Jesus would say, don't do what everybody else is doing. Everybody else it's all about me first. Hey, when a paycheck hits, when bonuses hit, whenever it hits, it's about me. My kingdom, and I got to build my kingdom. I got to keep going, and this whole, and then, depending on, I got to save, depending on my fear levels, and then maybe if there's something in the world, maybe like, a tsunami or an earthquake or a hurricane like what happened in Florida, it moves my heart, then I take a little bit of what I got and just, there you go. Jesus goes, come on. It may satisfy for a moment, but it eventually leaves you empty, and then you chase again, don't you? And it almost feels like it's owning you. He's like, you know what that is? That's a me first living with some left over giving. And if you're a follower of Jesus, please listen in carefully. Jesus has called you and I into something far greater. And he's not trying to get anything from you. He's actually inviting you into life and life to the full, but it requires a complete surrender to him. So if you are a follower of Jesus, would you at least consider that until Jesus is first in your finances, Jesus isn't first. Don't play the religious games with Jesus. He's very clear in Matthew 6. It's a great gift to give you and me, which means perhaps the reason God doesn't feel close to you, perhaps the reason why, that the adventure that I talk about, this life and life to the full, has nothing to do with my teaching or the music or the programs. It has everything to do with what you're doing with your money, because your heart will always follow your money. So Jesus says, I know that. I designed you. So I'm inviting you into something better. Life and life to the full. Jesus, how? He says, you got to reprioritize this. It's seek ye first living. What does that look like? Well, it looks like this. It's to give, save, and live on the rest. In other words, hey, you know what? As soon as I get a paycheck, as soon as money comes my way, as soon as that bonus comes my way, as soon as the inheritance comes my way, whatever it is, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to take it, I'm going to leverage it for the benefit of others, because that's his kingdom. I'm going to see an opportunity over there, and you know what? Man, that's an incredible opportunity to help people, to help children, medical needs. Hey, those environments like we just saw with Money Matters, and lives are changing in their small groups environments. Man, I want to fund that and facilitate that, because that is life change. That's what Jesus did for me, and I'm to love as Jesus called me to love. And then Jesus goes, seek first his kingdom. And then, I get it, you have needs. I get it, you need to save, you need to be responsible, you need to pay your bills, you need to pay the insurance. I mean, part of being a follower of Jesus is being responsible there. I get it. So do that. And when you reprioritize your giving the way Jesus invites us to, here's what you begin to discover, is that telling your money where to go is proof that you know your money isn't running the show. It's like, money, you're not going to own me. Money, you're not going to be my master. Money, you're not the boss of me. I'm going to show you. And here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go ahead and leverage it over here for their benefit. I'm going to leverage some over here in their benefit. And this is not a tithing issue. This is not a 10%. Tithing gets into religious systems. It's religious boxes, and I paid God off, and now I'm good. Jesus is far more into relationship. It's going, God, I'm inviting you into this every single time. How can I advance your kingdom more? Because none of this belongs to me. It all belongs to you. You see, if you're a follower of Christ, the litmus test for our devotion to God is our willingness to put him and others first in the area of our money and possessions. And I promise you, Jesus is not trying to get your money. He's trying to keep your money from owning you. Jesus clearly is inviting you into something you so deeply long for, life and life to the full. So, what does this mean for all of us? How would we kind of put this together and say, okay, what then shall I do? What would be wise to do in light of the teachings of Jesus? Well, here's what I would say, and I would invite everybody, if you're a follower of Jesus or you're not a follower of Jesus, and I'll tell you why I say that. I want to invite all of us for the next 2 months to do something. And it may feel pretty radical to you, but I want us all to do it because I want you to step in and have life and life to the full. So here's what I want to challenge you over the next 2 months. First and foremost, I want you to choose a percentage of your income and give it away as soon as you get paid, as soon as that hits your bank account. And I want you to pick a percentage of income that makes you growl on the inside. And here's what I mean. It's, those moments where you're like, oh, that moment where you're like, oh, I picked this percentage. And then it's like, this percentage? Oh, that's a little bit too much. Come on, that's a little bit ridiculous. Really? I want you to consider that. What is the percentage that makes you kind of growl on the inside and go, oh, that's a lot? And whatever that is, I want you to pick that, and then I want you to give it away first. Money, you are not going to own me. And you may ask, well, where do I give it? Where do I give it? Well, you pick and choose. This is not about me getting something from you or Jesus getting something from you. This is something that's for you. You pick whatever it is going around the world, whatever it is going around the city of Austin, whatever it is that your heart is with, that you're like, man, that is changing lives. I want to be part of that. That is whatever that is. You pick a percentage and you give it away right away. I want to challenge you to do that for the next 2 months, and I want you to see what happens. And secondly, and this perhaps is even more important than that. Secondly, let me tell you this. I went out of order. Yeah, try to memorize all this stuff, right? Anyways, here was the point of this. Thank you, Mark, for putting that up. He's fantastic. So here's the point. I did mention, I said the idea, like, I'm not trying to get something from you. And it's true. And I said this last week a little bit. The book, Paradox of Generosity, is a book that talks about this. It's a study done from the University of Notre Dame. And it's all about what does generosity do? See, this is why I said if you're not a follower of Jesus, do this. Do this. Because what Jesus is inviting all of us into is something that actually is life and life to the full. Because you read what the research says. This is a different quote from the one I read last week. It says, being a generous person is positively correlated with greater personal happiness, physical health, a stronger sense of purpose in life, avoidance of symptoms of depression, and greater interest in personal growth. So even if you're not a God follower and you think about this challenge, you're going, that sounds like life and life to the full. What if Jesus is actually inviting you into something that is for you? It's really important to consider that. And last of all, which I alluded to earlier, that I think perhaps is more important, is I want to challenge you over the next 2 months to do this, to pay attention to the internal tension this creates. I would imagine if you're hearing this right now, there's some angst inside of you, that maybe your internal lawyer's on pretty high, and you're wanting to push against a lot of this stuff. Remember, go to Jesus, Matthew 6. I really want you to stay with him. But I get that. And I want you to pay attention. Why is that? What's going on inside of you? You owe it to yourself to be self-aware. One of the greatest gifts that you can give yourself is not what do I feel, but why do I feel what I feel? Man, you are alive when you know the answer to that. I want you to get behind this tension that pushes so hard against generosity. What's going on in there? And then I want you to answer this question, or to listen closely to the conversation you have in your mind. You may be arguing with me. Perfect. I want you to argue with me. I think that's part of what makes this good, right? If there's tensions and we're wrestling together. You may be arguing right now with me because your spouse is going to do this challenge, and you're like, seriously, Buck, you created a gap in my marriage. Now I have to have that conversation this week. I get it. But get to the bottom of that. You owe it to yourself. Why is there so much tension around this subject? What's going on there? And you see, what I think you will discover at the heart of the issue has nothing to do with money. Has everything to do with what Jesus is teaching us. That who or what is going to be your master and your Lord of life. I so want you to step in to what Jesus invited you into. Life to the full. And Jesus' invitation is, kiddo, you're going to have to trust me. It is a paradoxical truth. You got to go palms up to actually receive it. But if you're willing to trust me, and I'm going to say you can, and even give my life to prove you can trust me, that's where you begin to discover what I've invited you into. That's what I want for you. Let me pray for us. Father, thank you so much for this moment. Thank you for loving us far more than perhaps we know, but we also know enough. We know that you are for us. You're not against us. So, Father, with this kind of subject, you know our hearts, you know our minds, you know exactly where we're at, and you're big enough to meet us, to handle all the questions, all the tensions. Show us, Father, what you want us to see. Give us the wisdom we need. And God, would you actually give us the courage to do something perhaps different than we've ever done in our lives, to experience you in a greater way. In Jesus' name, amen. Guys, thanks so much for being here. I'll see you next week.